So in the previous session, we talked about parallel builds, exporting binaries, multi-stage builds, multi-platform builds. So almost we are done with, uh, you know, understanding the Docker files. Now let's see what are the best practices that we need to follow while writing these Docker files. Okay. So first best practice is always use official images. Okay, so do not use any image that are not from the official organization. Okay. So always use the official images and also use specific versions of those base images. So never try to use latest tag. Always pin your versions to a specific version number. Okay, so whenever you run Docker build, so your Docker is going to pull the same version again and again. Okay, so never use the latest tag. Okay, so if possible, go for distillers images. Okay, the reason why we should go for distillers images, so they do not pack any unnecessary binaries like your bash, sh, copy, ls. So all these commands or utilities will be missing in that. Okay, you will have only the application and any sort of dependencies to run that application. Other than that, you will not have, anything in this distillers images. In fact, if you want to try to debug by exec, into the container, so that is also not possible. And if you're going for compiled based languages, always use multi-stage builds to further reduce the size of the images, which we already seen for Go. Okay. And always prefer copy command over add command. The reason why copy command is preferred is so you can exactly, copy the required files. But with add, what will happen is, your entire data will be copied. Okay. So we already seen how to use add to, copy the content from Git repositories, right? But when you're adding, you cannot control so which files and folders you need to copy into the image. Okay. So unless there is a specific requirement that you need to add files from a remote URL or you need to copy a tar file, so don't go for add. Okay. And always try to parameterize your Docker files. Okay. So don't just hard code anything, even if you want to use tag. Okay. So you can use arc tag. So by default set to some tag, but using this arc, you'll be able to build with a different tag using build arcs, right? So while I'm building my container image, I can just override the default tag by using build arguments. Okay, so this way, uh, you know, the entire Docker file can be parameterized using arguments. Okay, and always set the working directory. Okay, the reason why working directory is needed is you never know. So what is the default working directory for any base image? Okay, so once you use from instruction, always set the work dir so you'll know exactly in which folder you're working on. Okay, and always try to use cache. Okay, so just order your Dockerfile instructions in such a way that anything which is not changing always should be at the beginning of the Dockerfile, and all the changing instructions like copying your source code and building it should be at the end. Okay, so like if you're installing some dependencies and all, so always try to do that at the beginning of the Dockerfile. Okay, so that the subsequent Docker build instructions can use the layer cache. Okay. And when you're trying to copy something into your Docker image, always try to copy the required files only. Don't just use copy dot every time because it will also copy other data as well. In case if you want to ignore some data from being copied or used in the build context, always use Docker ignore file at the root of the repository. Okay, so this will ignore some files and folders to be copied to the, to be used while you're trying to build the image. This is one thing. Okay. And if you have multiple run instructions, okay, always try to club them together so that the entire instruction will be like a single layer in the final image. Okay. So don't just use run apt update as one instruction, run apt install as the other instruction. Okay. So if you have multiple run instructions, always try to club them together. So this will minimize the layers. Okay. And also do not try to install any unnecessary packages. Okay. And many package management tools like Yum and APT, they also maintain some cache. Okay, so they'll also put all the downloaded packages into some cache folder. So whenever you're trying to install something, okay, always make sure that at the end of this you always clear the package management cache. Okay, so it all depends upon which package manager you're using. So try to refer the documentation and try to clear that particular folder. Okay, that is another best practice, and avoid hard coding any credentials. Okay, you will understand this why I'm saying don't hard code credentials, because so when you're scanning your container images, your container scanning tools can detect these hard coded credentials. That is one thing. The other thing is it will be a security concern, because so when I'm talking about hard coding credentials, I mean to say about environment variables. Sometimes what people will do is they'll simply say environment secret is equal to, they'll put some personal access token, or they'll say env key equal to, they'll put some public key. Okay, so they'll try to pack the credentials using environment variables, or they'll try to copy the files, secret files into the container image. So which is not a best practice. Okay. And always try to use non-root user. By default, containers run with full access as the root user. So whenever you're done with installing all the required packages and all, try to change the user to some other user which has, who has least privileges. Okay. And always specify ports. This is just for documentation. Okay. But still specify the ports on which your container would be listening on. Right. And always set the entry point or the CMD to set the default process of your container. Clear, guys? Any questions? So let me show you some examples. Okay. So these are taken
Wait,
from
Vikram, I missed this.
Hmm.
Why did you say that to use copy instead of add?
Okay, I think it will be somewhere. Just a second. I think I have given it somewhere here. It's okay. See, usually, when we write Docker files, we use copy to copy the data into the images, right? Correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
say I can use copy, and then I can selectively copy only Python files into the image, like this star.py. Okay, got it. But if I have to use add, so it is always a remote URL into the uh, image. You never know what is coming from this URL, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And it will copy everything which is there in the URL into the image. So I can't just select only few files from this URL, before copying. And also when you're trying to copy a tar file, okay, any tar file from your local into the image, so it will try to extract it. Okay, so when I'm trying to copy tar file, I may not know what exactly are the files inside this tar file. Okay,
Okay. So the recommendation is to download it separately and then just
download it
copy it
separately,
regardless of the.
analyze it. Okay, so if it has any security related concerns, or some virus related files and all, okay, or malware related files, do not just copy. I mean, you will never know whether it is a malware file or not, but at least if you know what is that file, you can easily understand it. But in the form of a URL or tar file, you will never know what exactly you're copying into the image. And this URL might be coming from some untrusted sources as well, right?
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. Thank This is useful.
Okay. So these are some of the best practices. This is taken from official blog, Docker blog only. Okay. As we already discussed, your cache is important. That means the order of Dockerfile instructions is also important. Okay. So always try to make sure that the files which are not changing over the time, You copy at the beginning itself and try to install everything. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm first updating and installing some packages after this from instruction. Okay, and then I'm trying to copy, my sources or other files. Okay, so what is the advantage of this is, even if my sources and all change in my local machine, I'm trying to copy in the fourth, line, which means these three lines are not impacted. So every time when I try to build the image, so all the first three layers will be reused. Okay. But if you copy at the second instruction, so what will happen is, every time when there is a change in this copy instruction, okay, when you're trying to copy something, this copy instruction has to do it, right? Then the third and fourth layers should be rebuilt every time when the second instruction is changed. Okay, so this will take a lot of time in case, if you're not using cache. Okay. So more specific copy to limit cache burst, which means don't just use copy dot because it will copy everything. Okay, so always try to copy the data which is required. Okay, and the other thing is you need to club multiple from instructions. Okay, so in this case, what I'm doing is I'm trying to run multiple apt instructions, in a single line. Okay, so this is one best practice. And the other thing is, as I already discussed, don't try to install unnecessary dependencies. Okay, so every package manager tool or any tool will have certain flags that will disable installing some unnecessary or recommended packages. Okay, so when I'm trying to install this OpenJDK, it might also install some recommended packages which may not be required for my application. So always try to find such kind of flags. Okay. And once you're done installing anything, so always try to remove the cache. So they might, so basically maintain some cache within that environment. Like since you're downloading everything in this image from Debian, it might download and put some cache inside this image. So always try to remove it. Okay, got it? And as I already said, don't try to build everything from scratch. So if you need OpenJDK, you'll find that image directly. So do not take any Ubuntu base and then run apt install OpenJDK or any such commands to install, because the problem is it will try to increase the size of the image, because from itself will take some space, and on top of it, if you are installing something, it will again take some space, and this may not have all the optimizations, and you may not follow all the optimizations. Okay, which your official organizations follow while creating or publishing their images. Okay, that's why I always try to find the image. In many scenarios, you'll find your image. Okay, and as I already said, don't always go for latest. Always try to pin your version so that every time the same version will be used. Okay, right? And always look for distroless or slim or alpine variants of your images. Okay. Of course, during the development, you can take the full image. Okay, like OpenJDK 8. In case if your requirement is not that complicated, always try to use Alpine or Sling. First, test your application whether this OpenJDK JRE Alpine has all the required things to run your applications. Then use Alpine. If it is not suitable, go for Slim, which is quite higher in size than Alpine. Okay. Also test the distress images if it is suiting your requirement. Got it? Okay. And here, what they're trying to say is always build from the source in a consistent environment, which means, we had seen how a multi-stage build works. Okay. So in the multi-stage builds, what happens is you build your application in one stage and then just copy the artifact from the first stage to the second stage. Okay, that's the best practice. Instead of copying the jar file from your local machine. Okay, let's say why you're going for multi-stage builds. because you have to build the application, right? First, correct?
Yes, Vikram.
In case if the application is already built locally, you'll have the jar or war file. Okay, so what will happen if I just copy this app or jar file from local machine into the container image? Of course, it will also work because all I require is this app.jar file, which I'm starting it in the using CMD or entry point. Okay, but what Docker recommends is instead of copying the artifacts from your local machine into the image, so build them within the image and then try to use multi-stage builds to further reduce the size of the images. Okay. Then fetch dependencies in a separate step, as I already said. So if you have any dependencies like pom.xml file, or if you have to install something, always do it as a separate step. Okay. If you see here, I just took the base image, set the working directory, and copied only the dependencies file, and then I installed the dependencies. So the reason why I install dependencies is because these dependencies may not change often. Okay. And then only I'm trying to copy the source files and trying to package it. So what will happen if I use copy dot dot here? Then it will also copy the source file. And first time it is fine. So it is setting the work directory, copying the sources and the dependencies, and then it is installing the dependencies. This is fine. In case if the dependencies don't change, but if your source file changes, the third instruction change. If third instruction changes, the fourth instruction should run even though there is no change in the dependency, right? Which means you're not using the cache, you're invalidating the cache unnecessarily. Clear?
Yes, Vikram.
Okay. And finally, multi-stage builds, which we already know. So these are some of the best practices. Okay. You can follow these two links. If you want to know more about the best practices, because these best practices gets updated every day. I mean, with every Docker releases. So do try to follow this. Okay. And
Okay.
also,
One question. So, how it different from copying a jar building from local will be less
so here
advanced?
they're saying if you want to build from a consistent source, okay, always try to build it because you never know whether the jar file which you have, so whether it is built now or it is built the previous time. Okay. So you may not invoke or generate that jar file every time, right? But if it is there, your Docker file will try to copy it. It won't complain that the jar file is not existing.
Okay.
Okay. So it is asking you to every time build it. Okay. In order to have a consistent, application environment.
Okay. And should I use distroless or should I use Scratch generally?
So Scratch is something, it won't have anything. Like distillers images are meant for various languages like Java, Python, and all. But Scratch is not like that. It doesn't have anything. Okay. Then on top of it, again, you need to install Java or Python to run your Java or Python applications. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm asking is to use a base image, which is minimal and which provides you the environment to run your image.
Okay. Distroless are not just OS, it's also application as well, right? Then. Okay.
No, no. Distillers are the images. It will not have bash, sh, copy, all those, what do you say, unnecessary binaries. So if I'm talking about distillers images for Java, it will only have Java related dependencies.
Okay.
But Scratch is not like that. Scratch will not have anything at all.
Okay.
Okay. And, whatever are the, the best practices that we talked about. Okay, so those are not concerned about the security of your Docker images. Of course, some are there, but still, you need to follow some security best practices. So, like using the minimal images, setting the least privileged user, as we already discussed. Okay, so always try to scan your Docker images. Okay, when you build it. Okay, you can also scan the the base images that you use, and also you can scan the final image that you generate. Okay, so that is one best practice. Anyways, I'm going to talk about Trivy scanning. I'll talk about what is SBOM, what is a CVE, Docker Scout, all those things. But remember, you should always scan your container images, um, either locally or in your CI pipelines. Okay. Yeah, that is one thing. And always try to use labels for your Docker files. Okay, so I never gave priority to these labels in these sessions due to time constraints, but always try to use the metadata. Earlier, metadata used to be in the form of a maintainer, right? But now a maintainer is deprecated. You should use labels. Always try to use the labels. Okay, and always use a linter. So linter, you can say it is a static scanning tool. Okay, just it will be like your what do you say, container scanning tool itself, but it may not be as powerful as a container scanning tool. But linters like Lint, okay, they will provide at least some best practices. Okay, so during your development phase itself, and some of these tools, right, they get directly integrated with VS Code, or else they will come with VS Code extension. Not sure about VS Code. Yeah, I think VS Code Hadolint is there. So I can basically go to the VS Code marketplace, like extensions, and then Hadolint. Okay. So you also have linter. So linter is for, I think, for all the programming languages. So Hadolint is for your Docker files. So it is enabled. So how do I use it is I can just take any, I can open any Docker file. I think right click on it. Let me see how to probably this run test. Let me see what it will invoke. Okay, let's go back to the documentation. Okay, I think Hadolin should also exist within your. So that's for VS Code. Install for Windows. Okay, on Windows, I can do like this scoop install Hadolin, but I don't know scoop is installed or not. Let's directly go to the releases. This is for Darwin Windows, this exe file. Oh, what happened? Oh, it's not installed. It's not installed. Oh, I need to invoke it like this. Just a second. Let me try to copy into some path which I already have. Just a second, guys. I'm just trying to rename it so that I can just use Hadolint like this. Okay, so now I just copied Hadolint into the path. Okay, and after that, how do I invoke it? Hadolint help, and then I need to just provide the Dockerfile as an input. Okay, but VS Code should automatically detect it. Okay, that's fine. What I'll do is I'll try to open my folder now. Just go to any folder that has a Docker file in it. Okay, so I have two Docker files. Let me just run Hadolint Docker file. Okay. So these are the recommendations it is trying to give me. Okay. So if I just open my Docker file, so this is the Docker file. Okay, it says pin versions in apt get installed. So that is one recommendation it is saying. So it is saying whenever you're trying to install Python 3 or anything, always try to use a version number. And okay, see here, it is also suggesting you whenever you're doing apt install, use --no recommends. Okay. And the other thing is pin versions in pip. Okay, so like pip install, it is saying, so whenever you're running pip install something, always try to use certain versions, something like this. That is one of the best practice it is saying. Use arguments for CMD and entry point. Okay, so it says this whatever CMD and entry point to this format is not good. Always go for the executable format. Okay, so it's trying to give you that suggestion. Understood, guys?
Yes, Vikram.
Can you increase the font, please? Font size, please? Okay. So, those are the best practices it is suggesting. So I think in VS Code also it should integrate well. Probably I need to restart VS Code or something because I just installed the binary file. Okay. So that is,
Vikram,
about, yes,
but
please.
this Hadolint is not for security best practice, right? It's just says as a
It's
best
security
practice.
best practice only, but
Okay.
it may not detect the, what are the files that are corrupted or the files
Okay.
which have security related issues, common CVs or vulnerabilities. So those may not be checked. Okay, but still it is a good practice to use Hadolint while you're, writing the Docker files.